Okay. Hopefully this works this time. We did have Kevin Anderson on this podcast a few weeks ago, and then we rescheduled because I had some recording issues. And then Kevin had to hide in his bunker because there were major tornadoes that ripped through the Tulsa area a couple weeks back, which it looks like you made it through that. So going to have to ask you all about that.
I survived. Yeah, for sure. But yes, thank you for rescheduling.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
The only downside, Jeremy, is we're in prime March Madness time. So if it wasn't Kevin, it'd probably be some other guest. So I'll probably have the ticker up in the background, just kind of monitoring some of the early afternoon games. But you know me, my passion and love for college basketball. So I'll just work 2 jobs.
Corey, should we ask how the bracket's going out of the gate? I mean, is it something you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I'd say
bracket?
it's respectable, right? I mean, I thought Santa Clara was going to beat Kentucky this morning, so I had that. I liked Akron over Texas Tech. I thought Akron had a chance. So, you take a couple gambles on that. But I wasn't too crazy on a lot of the upsets. Because even when they sneak past, I don't think they make too big of a run. So I think it's respectable now, but we'll see what happens over the next round. So I think it's fine. Jeremy, did you even get around filling a bracket? You're so busy these days.
I did 4 brackets. Vary it up a little bit. One really big tournament, and then one that's single entry that I do every year. I enjoy it. I like to do a little bit more research, feel a little bit more confident. I also feel like ever since the players have started getting paid, there's less upsets now. So I don't know. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. Like last year was all chalk, right? It was 4 number ones. It didn't really, upsets are fewer and far between now. We're going to see how this whole NIL thing shakes out. So something to keep an eye on. No Old Dominion this year. No long run from Kevin's boys, but we'll get into all of that. So without further ado, with basketball in the background, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Who are you, man? Who is this Kevin Anderson from XALTER?
Yes, well, I'm not the one from the Matrix. My name's Kevin Anderson. Already got a clue that I am based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so as they call Tornado Alley. I am the CEO of a company called XALTER, which we're going to talk about. That's focused on perfecting workforce performance for the energy industry using some pretty cool technologies. I'm kind of a lifetime serial entrepreneur, and all the scars and a few trophies to prove that. I'm a father of 2 daughters, 21 and 19, and still on wife number 1, so kind of proud of that too. I keep selling and she keeps buying, so yeah.
She'll be listening to this podcast later. Really, really.
She might. She probably won't. She hears me talk enough. She's not going to seek out this opportunity to hear me talk. But anyway, that's the short version.
Well, Jamie, I got to give the long version. Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
But just no credit. Usually, we've done with the last few guests is we ask them, to talk about who they are and all that, and it usually just starts in to school and work, and then it goes on from there. Kevin did bring into the family dynamic, which is good because that's definitely part of it. I think we need to make sure we address that. So I'm glad you did. Usually it comes out later in the podcast for people, but I think it's important to acknowledge it definitely on the front end.
Yes, I agree. I don't know about you guys, but it does have an impact on who one is, the family.
Oh yeah. I think career-wise for me, before I had kids, it was really just, make enough to pay for yourself, and then you get in a relationship with somebody, you get married, it's enough to pay for both of you, but, occasional vacation, going to weddings, going out to dinner. Once I had kids, and I have 3 of them, but when Julia came, my first one, I was probably about 30. It really changed. I felt like it made me a lot more selfless and made me real much more serious about my career, frankly. Like I need
Oh
to
yeah.
build
Yep.
something, right? I got to care for more people. I got more bills. Diapers ain't cheap. Daycare ain't cheap, right?
Nope.
All those things. So um, for me, that was sort of a pivotal moment when I look back on my life and career, and did get a little more serious, and actually took a different job very shortly after um, I had my first kid, which is a whole different story. But this is not about me today. It is about Kevin Anderson, who actually,
It's about us, Jeremy. It's about us.
Corey and I could always yak it up
Ish.
here, but Kevin, you're a California kid originally, and
I
decided for
am.
one reason or another you wanted to go to college in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So talk about your upbringing a little
Yes.
bit and what brought you 2,000 miles away to Tornado Alley.
Yeah. No. There's a lot of chapters to that story. So let me see if I can pick the right ones. I did grow up in Southern California. I know I look really young, but I grew up in the 80s. So went to high school, junior high and high school and college were in the 80s. So I'd like to say to all those youngsters out there, the 80s really were as awesome as they say. So growing up in Southern California in the 80s was, in my opinion, about as good as it gets. So great music, spent a lot of time at the beach, drove a air-cooled Carmen Ghia Volkswagen, did not surf, but again, loved just the California lifestyle. Uh, but did decide, yeah, to go to college in Oklahoma. The short version of that is all my friends were going to go to San Diego State and join the ski team, the snow ski team, and live on Mission Beach, which sounded awesome. But I
Mm-hmm.
kind of did the math and said I will never graduate from college if I go with them, because I like a lot of other things way more than school, right? So I knew a little bit about a school, it's a private school, Roberts University here in Tulsa. I had a cousin coming here, and I thought, I think it might be time for me to put myself in timeout and hit the reboot button. I didn't know anything about Oklahoma, to be honest. I just knew it was probably a fresh start, and I was not going to have a lot to do. I didn't bring a car, and I figured it would force me to focus and get serious and study. And I mean, mission accomplished. I actually got myself out of college in 4 years with a finance degree. I still have dreams. I don't know why. I still have dreams where I realize I'm short credits and I'm not going to graduate on time. I don't know why that's such a primal. There's a very primal fear that I don't know what it is, but that's where I constantly go back to is like I'm not going to graduate from college. So I had a lot of fear around that apparently that I'm still processing. But yeah, came to Oklahoma, fell in love with it. Really, I love this part of the country. It's the flyover states, and for all you on the coast, just stay where you are. Nothing to see here. But yeah, love here. Met my wife in college. She's from Virginia, and so here we are. We're in Oklahoma.
Started a life there. Did you ever leave after college, or have you been in Oklahoma
Oh
your entire
yeah,
adult
yeah.
life?
No, yeah. So thank you for asking that. No, I left a couple of times. So we lived in Dallas for a little while. This is kind of the entrepreneurial, part of my story too. Just I lived in Virginia for a season. Actually had a business miserably fail, and like worst case scenario is living in your father-in-law's basement
Mm.
while you dig yourself out of debt, right?
Oh,
You know, the whole I told you not to marry that kid. Now look where you are. But he was very gracious. So spent some time in Virginia. Actually ended up being a great season for us. Moved back to Oklahoma. Moved back to Virginia again. Then moved back to Oklahoma. And now I'm going to die here. So that's it.
for,
Yes.
for sure. Like you're done picking up.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm dying here. But yeah, I moved around. I love big cities. I get it. I call Tulsa kind of a oversized town, and it's kind of Goldilocks for me. It's like the right size, just right.
Well, I love Tulsa. I mean, you and I have talked about, I went to school there, and I have a lot of friends back
That's
in
right.
Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and just great people.
Agreed.
When I was after school, I was there for a year and a half before I came to Houston. But it felt like, just after being there for a short period of time, you just kind of fall into that, Tulsa kind of town, that oversized town where it's
Yeah.
like very comfortable. I already know where the
Hmm.
town is. I can get to
Right.
everything. It has pretty much everything I need. I know it's not as big as Dallas and offers all the
Right.
things that a bigger city has, but like it's got quite a bit, and um, the people were awesome. So I've got nothing but love for T Town out there.
Well, I appreciate that, Corey. Yeah, and and I think it's come a long way. I mean, there's a lot happening here. It is growing, it is evolving. But yeah, it's a great part of the country, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It was never on the list of places that I thought I would go to, 20 or 30 times in my adult life, but I have, and I enjoy it. The pace is
Yeah.
pretty casual. There's a lot of good restaurants. Like you said, people are nice. I will say the oil and gas industry has condensed there. It's shrunk. I mean, I remember going there to meet with Newfield and various others, and now it feels like it's concentrated to a few bigger companies, whereas a lot of centralization and acquisitions have happened, making Houston really the continued hub. And
Yeah.
Denver shrunk as well. I mean, Corey used to come up here all the time on business, and there's just less here now, right? I mean, the whole Civitas thing, smashing 8 local companies together, and then they get rolled into SM, and PDC's gone, and Forest, and um, there's just not as much, right? And it's a bummer when you're in a town that is super reliant on that. But the offshoot is that some technology does come out of it, and that's happened in Tulsa with you, Kevin, kind of leading the charge a little bit, which we'll get into here momentarily. But so Oral Roberts, decided not to be a dentist though, because I'm sure everybody
He
just
did.
assumes that at a school called Oral Roberts, you're going to be a
There
dentist,
would be some kind of oral action going on, right? There's just something
but
related
there's
to
not.
oral.
But there's not.
There's not. There's not. No. Oral. So here's the thing about Oral, which I think you will appreciate. You probably don't know a whole lot about him. He's a
No.
big swing kind of guy. You know, Here's what I mean by that. So he had a couple of big ideas, and he built an empire based on it, a university and a bunch of stuff. But he had a couple of profound ideas. One was God was good. He wasn't an angry old dude who wanted to rap you on your knuckles, and he thought something good would happen to you every day. So he was the
Hmm.
glass half full guy in a time when the glass was half empty, and it had kind of a profound impact on how people feel about that subject. He's an interesting dude. He's a master communicator, um, and again, he kind of created quite the legacy. You'd have to be in some pretty niche subcultures to know his story, but it's an interesting story for sure.
Oh, obviously stuck with you. I went to Brandeis
Yeah.
University. It's a small liberal arts school in the Northeast. Our mascot, um, Louis Brandeis, was a judge, like a justice of the Supreme Court. He was a judge. So it was the Brandeis judges.
Right.
So I always like to warn people, you are being judged right now constantly by me.
Yes.
You say God is
Oh,
good.
is that
I
what you took
say
from your?
you're being judged because I'm a judge. So that's sort of how it works. So sorry,
Yeah.
guys, I'm judging all of you right
Okay.
now. Corey, on the other hand, is a cowboy, but he's a very urban cowboy living in the Woodlands, Texas now.
That's right. Also known as the Pokes, but I think Cowboys is best way to say it. But I think you and the judge thing, man, that now it makes sense why you still carry that around a little bit.
You're judgy. Are you very judgy,
I'm
Jeremy?
just, I'm a
No,
kid.
I'm actually I
I
align
kid.
more with the Oral Roberts thinking of the glass is half full. When someone asks me like, "How are you doing?" I think that you can sort of create that answer, like even if it's not your best day. Like, and I'm not saying this just to like
Yeah.
try to be this super optimist, but I truly believe like that being alive is a gift. It's a blessing, right? And even on your
Yes,
worst
agreed.
day, like you're still
Yes.
here. We can still talk about it. We can still
You're
talk
still
about your
alive,
shittiest
and
days.
it could always be worse.
It could definitely be worse, and you can cultivate positivity. And I think with
Yeah,
having kids, as you
agreed.
guys know, that's important because there's a lot of noise and negativity around you, and people want to talk politics and all this bullshit. And I don't get into that. I want to try to do something good for my family, for myself, for my friends, and the people around me every day. And Kevin, I get that vibe from you too. You know, we do some work together
Yes.
with XALTER, and I've noticed
Yeah.
like you enjoy the connection element, but I think there's
I
a
do.
part of your mission that you want to empower and align with the way people want to learn. Like classroom learning
Yes.
is challenging. And I say this as both my parents
It
were
is.
teachers, right? But it's very dry. And what you're doing with taking virtual reality, extended reality to the oil field,
Yeah.
it's cool, but it's also kind of fun, right? And so when I'm like talking to
Yeah.
people about what
Yeah,
you
it
do, I'm
is.
like, here's the thing too, is like, yeah, it's business and you're trying to make money. And of course we want to sell you this thing and you go use it. But you know what? Like this might make work a little bit more fun. And isn't there something to that? Right. So I'm curious about like that element of what you've built at XALTER. And I know we could talk about all the things that led to XALTER, but like, is there an
Yeah.
element of that you feel that you can actually make work a little bit more fun for people by putting them in these crazy headsets and living in this virtual reality world?
Yeah. I mean, so here's how I would say it. You know, I'm a fan of technology, right? I mean, I love technology, but I probably in a little different way than I would classify like a traditional technologist, and because I'm much more interested in what technology can do for people. I would say I'm interested in people, right? They're my favorite thing. You know, if I had to pick one thing, I'd pick people, right? So I'm interested in technology. How do we leverage it to make, you know, learning better, right? Living better. Like how does that become a tailwind for us as human beings? So, you know, when I see technology, I'm not thinking about how to take it apart and solder it back together. I'm interested in like, well, what could this do? You know, like how could this have an impact? And so learning, you know, is obviously we're gonna talk about that for a minute. But yes, to answer your question, I am interested in cool stuff. You know, this technology's really interesting to me, but foundationally because of what I think it can do for us as human beings, you know, and performance and skill transfer and, you know, how do we get better at what we're doing? You know, technology can be a very scary thing. We're in a time where you hear AI, and again, here's the glass half full, you know, or half empty conversation, right? I'm not thinking about AI as a substitution or replacement for human intelligence. I'm thinking about how does AI augment and supplement and empower human intelligence? Because there is two sides to that coin, right? There's a lot of conversations about how does AI, you know, not take people out of their jobs, right? How all these jobs going away. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in how does it empower people to perform?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It
Oh
does.
yeah.
I think it does, and I think to your point, it's what side of the coin are you on that you want to
Right.
spend more of your mental bandwidth and really kind of focus on?
Yeah.
How am I cost cutting and trying to drive, shareholder return and value from that perspective,
Sure.
and just totally running down that direction, or
Yeah.
just how do I do this to empower my people,
Yeah.
and just use it to your advantage, not
Yeah.
with too much power and letting it get your mind a little crazy. But I'm curious, Kevin, because this, Jeremy, we're on another episode of like our founder-led series.
Yeah.
I really like this series because it just brings so much that I think a lot of our listeners, really resonates with them, and they're just really curious. So I think we got to keep that going a little bit longer. But what's I think interesting with Kevin is, so we got founder-led checked, we've got the technology mindset checked, and then we've got this little ism of a dude from California bringing that tech into the oil and gas space, which you don't really find too much, right? So
No.
I'd like to ask Kevin, just some people, right? Just was it, I always had a thing for the oil and gas space, but I was more of a tech guy and I wanted to find a
Sure.
way into it. Was it,
Yeah.
I'm just a tech guy. I love building stuff. I love my entrepreneurship, so you can even bring that in.
That's a good
But like,
question.
how did all that come to be for you? Kind of think of how I got to where I am now with what XALTER's doing, right?
Yeah, so great. Well, let me do this. I'm going to answer your question, but let me do this to make sure, because I don't know if I've done a good job of this yet. Let me tell you what XALTER does, right?
That's
So
fair.
we're focused on we're focused on frontline performance. So think your frontline technicians and operators that are actually interacting, with the equipment in the field, right? And what we're focused on is how do we leverage what we call head-mounted displays. If you call them goggles, I'll call you a boomer. But everybody, I hope by now, has seen someone with a VR headset on, right? So how do we leverage virtual reality technology and virtual reality or immersive as a medium, right? For skill transfer and for frontline and performance, starting with operational maintenance and safety training, right? So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background, like what are we focused on now? Is again, VR, AI is a very interesting part of that conversation we maybe get a little chance to get into later. But how can we leverage this tech so that frontline workers in energy, we have attracted a new generation of workers, which is a huge challenge. How do we accelerate competency and get them ready for the workforce? And then lastly, how do we close, what I would call readiness gaps that put people and equipment at risk, right? So those are the things that we're focused on at XALTER, right? All right, so that's what we're doing, but let me pull back and tell you how I got here.
Yep.
So my background actually was in media production. So spent most of my career building what is called now content, right? So, and the mediums we worked in were video and animation, did a lot of visual effects work, a lot of TV and commercial work. And really that was centered around influence, right? If you thought about mediums as a means of communicating, as a means of influence, for the last 50, 60 years, really 100 years, motion media has been the most influential, right? Proof of that is they made a cartoon about, little deers. A bunch of grown men watched it in a movie theater, and then half of them stopped hunting, right? So I just mean, there's impact around story. I'm talking about Bambi, right? I don't know if you know that story.
Oh, yeah, no.
I would, Jeremy would have got it on multiple choice.
Yeah, he would have got a multiple choice. But yeah, I just mean that story, even if it's a cartoon, has an impact on us, right? So it's an influential medium. I put a headset on in 2014. This was right when headsets were about to be commercialized. And they were sending them out to studios like mine because they wanted studios that made content, digital content like we did, to start thinking about how could we leverage this technology. It absolutely blew my mind. So this was, over 10 years ago. But I put a headset on and realized it was a completely different medium, right? It wasn't TV plus, it was something different. That really got my attention. I just didn't think that I'd be alive when a new medium was invented, and then I started doing some research. Interestingly, VR has only been scalable, commercialized in the last 10 years. But as a technology, it's been around for longer than that. So let's say 25, probably almost 30 years, but kind of locked in. Some major research institutions had what they called immersion labs, right? So you can imagine they had one headset in a huge laboratory with a lot of equipment, but they'd been doing a lot of research around, just this medium, its impact and influence on people. And the white papers with really, long, uninteresting names were fascinating. It was profoundly impactful if you experienced content in a headset. And that is because it's multimodal. So that's just a fancy word for multisensory. So, it's capturing your eyes and ears. It's immersive, which means you're completely captured, right? And the simple version, my layman's version is when you experience something in a headset, you encode it like it's a memory. You recall it as if you did it because your eyes and ears are captured. So that really got my attention. I thought, okay, I'm all in, So in 2015, started to turn my business toward this new medium. And the goal was to just be early and figure it out, keep the lights on until, adoption came along. I knew it would be a long time. I know it wasn't going to be an overnight success. New technologies never quick. But there were really only two routes forward if you wanted to be in virtual reality. In the early days, you had to go gaming, which is the consumer route, or you had to go training if you wanted to go the enterprise route, right? These were the two entry points, right, for this medium, because those two entry points were where the medium could deliver value the earliest, right? So, and the reason of the training just is because if you thought about the flight simulator, right, if you thought about its use kind of in a training spectrum between classroom and hands-on, it's kind of that same model. So I realized I wanted to do training. I was very interested in that. And the oil and gas question, Corey, is answered probably in two ways. I mean, one, just organically, I'm in Tulsa. So I'd already done a lot of work in the past through agencies and even directly. I'd worked with a lot of companies, Chesapeake and Williams and, One Oak and a long list of companies that I'd done some work for in the past, building animation or videos for them. So I had some relationships there. But the other thing is just, it's a great market, even though it's not known for, early adoption of tech. It kind of checks a lot of the boxes that you're looking for value for VR. So you've got, very complex environments that are spatial, a lot of hands-on procedures that people need to learn, right?
Yeah, that are dangerous, that are super dangerous.
Right. Risk, there's significant risk to people and equipment, right, if mistakes are made. So, if you got to learn very complicated processes in complex environments and they're high risk, that's the trifecta for application for VR, right, as a training medium. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the answer to why energy, right, is it checks all three of those boxes.
You probably have to add another important one, which is a lot of these drilling sites, or we'll just generalize it and say sites, aren't down the street from me in the Woodlands.
Yeah.
No.
Or just you in Tulsa. There are some very remote locations that
Yes.
make Midland feel very far, right? You get to Midland, you can
Yes.
still be driving several hours just to get to location. And
Right.
so, yeah, are you doing on the job training, but people are having to drive hours away one way to get that on site job training?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yes.
I think location and remote location is very important in the oil and gas space for what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a value proposition for what you're talking about, right? So how do you kind of scale experiences, right, that you need your employees to have, and the logistical challenges, right, of those locations is one of the costs for that training, right? Is, again, you got to get everybody in one place at one time when it's not raining or 110 degrees. If you want to teach on some of these sites, right? So one of several issues that oil and gas has when it comes to training, I do want to position it for all the naysayers out there who have immediately, gone to the default position of, well, it'll never replace hands-on training. And the answer to that is, you are absolutely right.
Right.
Right. So this is not a substitution for hands-on training, right? Any more than a flight simulator is a substitution for, getting in a plane and flying. But there's a place for it, right? And so, when you talk about, Corey, the classroom setting and in the field, I am a big believer that those are still going to be relevant in our lifetime and beyond, right? And what's interesting is, every medium we've ever invented has never completely gone away because it's unique and it has a unique set of strengths. If you thought about, reading and books, if you thought of radio, I'm sure everybody said when TV came, radio was dead, right? If, here we are on podcasts, right? I mean, just every medium brings something to the table. So my argument is this is not a replacement for any of the existing mediums in which we learn, but it is a heck of a new tool with a lot of really interesting attributes to add to that mix, right? and it solves
Yeah.
a lot of problems, just the one that you're addressing. Yeah.
Jerry, let me add one more because I know you got some stuff to say, but the other thing that we've been hearing a lot for a long time in this industry is like just that tribal knowledge and that older generational knowledge
Gotta,
Yeah.
leaving. And you got to think about, the types of engineers or just, kind of blue collar style workers that are working on the field, to say just go read books, that might not be a lot of their style. And there could be guys out there who've been doing it 30 years and they just want to retire or they're just, whatever it is, but they're so good at what they do, right? Like I
Right.
came across this in my previous company and learning about compression units. And I came
Right.
across just some studs of compression engineers, that just knew so much about the business. And there were several times they would talk and I knew they probably had a few years left. I'm like, there's no way that brain is going to dump all that knowledge to these people. And so I think about that from teaching of what this is, that you
Yeah.
got to have something scalable because like we all have, right? Like you have a favorite trade, maybe you're like, this electrician is like way better than the other trades I have, right?
Yeah.
But then you're like, if I'm running a company, like an oil and gas company, they're not all going to be, I mean, they're good, but there's going to be some better than others, right? And so
Yep.
how do you scale that, right? Because it's just hard to put all those people in the same place. So I just think scalability for education purposes has to be important for this topic. It just,
Corey,
maybe some
we're
data, just an
clearly
opinion.
no. We're clearly spending too much time together because that last comment literally took the two things that I was going to say, which is you talk about the great crew change, right? And yes, like there still needs to be the ride arounds that happen with the guy who's 64 years old and is going to retire in a few years to show the worms or the green beans, whatever you want to call them, how to do the job, right? But it would be kind of cool if before those guys ever got in that truck, they were in a headset,
Yeah.
familiarizing themselves with the potential site that they were going to, whether that's a gas production site, a oil production site, a gas compressor, all those things. That's one. And two, Corey, I was thinking about you because your whole career was in accounting, right? Like you were an accountant, you were selling software to the accounting industry. You were running invoicing systems at, large technology companies. And then you get a job as the VP of sales at Detection, where you are selling compressor fleet optimization. Did you have any idea what a
Ooh, that
compressor
sounds
even
exciting.
was? Like, wouldn't it have been helpful if you could have gotten in a VR headset and someone said, "Hey, dude, let's go meet over here." Darnell Franco comes out and says, "Corey, I'll meet you in this virtual world," and he shows you what a compressor is like, and then you go to a site and you see what a compressor is like, and like I think that would have been so incredibly invaluable to someone like you, because then you bring Funk Futures on to be your part of your like top of funnel lead gen arm, and you had to explain to me what a compressor was, and I've been in this space for 20 years, right? Because I just hadn't touched it before. It would have been cool if you could have met me in a virtual world to show me what a compressor was. So I think that this has a relatively long tail to it, and I think the combination of the great crew change, the way that people learn, and it's not just this younger tech forward generation, it's the way I would have learned better too, frankly, if VR was around when I was a kid,
Yeah.
combined with like the danger. Like we were on a call earlier, I was talking to like a large operator today, and they're like, it's almost like it's a rite of passage to like cut yourself really bad or burn yourself when you go to, I'm not joking, when you go to an oil site as like a younger person. It's like, oh well, everybody else has done it. It's like that doesn't have to happen. Like, shouldn't be a rite of passage. You shouldn't have to lose a finger
Right.
to be like an oil worker. So anyways, I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but Corey, like we're talking the same language here, and Kevin, I think that you see all of this, right? And it has to be somewhat frustrating, I would think, to be like, why aren't more companies doing this? Maybe the majors are developing something, but it's like work to convince people that this is a step in that training process and that people don't retain shit in the classroom. And then you have them ride around with somebody for 2 months and go get them. Like that's the
Yeah.
challenge, right? It's the
Yeah.
human challenge.
It is the challenge. I mean, speaking to the what I would call the knowledge capture, knowledge retention. I mean, Corey, you're right. It's why I think now is such a critical season because I think the stat is 100% of the baby boomers will be retirement age, even the youngest of them, by 2030, right? So the entire generation that's kind of the repository of all this experience is retiring in the next 4 years, right? I just mean the tail end. So, a lot of these companies are watching a lot of tribal knowledge, a lot of expertise kind of go out the door without a lot of ideas about how do we kind of capture that. So, the thing that's interesting about VR as a medium is it's very precise. And what's interesting about it is it's not a place just to transfer information, right? You can do that in a classroom. So, these guys can make manuals for you. They can create videos for you. But what VR does really well is model behavior, right? Which is different than knowing how to do something, but how do you model the behavior to do that successfully, right? In that environment. The opportunity that companies have right now, and I'm kind of dramatic. I'm trying to get their attention around this, is to get all that information, and I call it an encoding process. But how do we pull all that travel information out of these guys, turn it into these virtual reality experiences where we've modeled those behaviors properly, and then it does scale. To your point, right? Because once it's a procedural environment or a scenario with the rule set inside a headset, you've got it. You can scale it, infinitely. I mean, the other part of this that's been very interesting to watch is just getting to a single source of truth around a process. If you thought about the safety guys, the frontline operators, the subject matter expert, and the L&D people, right? Usually just getting all them in a room and getting consensus. This is how we do it. This is the safety culture. This is the information we need to communicate, to these operators, how we need to communicate it, when we need to communicate it, right? That's a huge opportunity. And VR forces that consensus and that single source of truth that often you can't, just other mediums can't carry it, right? Like they don't. So there's a huge opportunity to use this transition as that knowledge capture strategy that then becomes scalable. But it's like, to your point, Jeremy, it's a tough sell right now. I think you and I both know that because it's change.
It's change.
And you've got to get the right people in the room to understand why. I would argue from a larger standpoint, head-mounted displays is the next human-machine interface, and I don't care if you believe me or not. I was super skeptical when I had a flip phone. I had my Razor, and everybody was telling me I'm gonna, do everything on my mobile phone. I thought that's just ridiculous. I gotta hit, the letter. I gotta hit the number 3 to make a C. I gotta hit it 3 times, right? Like, what are you talking about? And I know I sound like that guy, but I'm just telling you, we are going to have wearable computers. We're going to integrate, compute and we're going to have AI interfaces. We're going to wear glasses. It's coming. So, now's the time to figure out how you're going to leverage that to beat your competitors in the field.
And compete
I love
for
that.
the young folks.
Well, there it is. Yeah. That's a big conversation too, is, when you think about technology in this next generation, right? These are what we call digital natives, right? I love torturing my children with stories of, what it was like without the internet. And
you don't know what it was like. I had a black and white TV.
You don't know what it was like. I was the remote. My dad would make me get up from the couch and turn the knob, right? Like, you don't understand. But these kids are digital natives.
The inner knob too, just to make sure that you had like the quality print. Corey, you old enough for that?
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Have you ever held 2 antennas?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually have, because my first TV in my bedroom when I was younger was like, I can't remember if it was my mom or dad's, but you had the TV. Yeah. I think I was throwing some aluminum foil on it. I was always moving it. I was hitting the side of the TV if it wasn't, very Nintendo 64, right? Blow through the cartridge. Get it going.
Golden eye, baby. The good old days. But so here's a couple stats that ought to scare the listeners that care is I think they did a survey. 93% of millennials and Gen Zers, the technology they use at their work, that's going to impact where they go to work. So meaning they're technology first. You
Yeah.
know, they want to go somewhere where the technology is the latest, right? And I think 43% of them will leave if the technology they're using is substandard, right?
Mm.
So imagine if you're out trying to recruit for your industry or your company and you've got a pen and a trifold brochure, right? Or you've got a headset and you're saying, put this on, I'm going to show you what it's like, for our guys to be in the field. I mean, your first impression, right? It's like, well, how do you want to lead? How do you want to demonstrate right out of the gate that you're leaning into technology, especially in a way that shows that you care and investing in your workforce, right? I mean, again, you want to communicate, you want to speak their love language. Say, we're spending a lot of money on this technology, so when you're out in the field, you're safe and know what you're doing and performing.
Mm.
That's a heck of an opener.
Yeah, it
In
is.
your experience, have you we're gonna have to go down to a dude, but I just think like that one of the angles could be around you know, just HSE safety in general,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
zero incident kind of thought that all these companies
Hmm.
have to be keeping top of mind. Like,
Yep.
Sure.
do they look at this as like a bullet point initiative that they're always kind of wondering how do they, reduce incidents like this, or it's always on their mind, but like we've always done it this way and no one's come to us with a better alternative to reduce that exposure? Like, is that one of the angles you guys have tried with
Yeah,
it?
I mean, it is, Corey. I mean, safety is a really interesting topic. And talking to the HSE guys, first of all, a lot of them will tell you, they're really struggling because safety's boring. It usually
Yeah.
means you have to get in a class and somebody talks to you, right? And so what I hear a lot is, well, how do you make safety more engaging, more
Yeah.
interesting? Nobody wants to do the safety briefings. They're boring. So that they're struggling already, right? Just out of the gate. And,
Tough pitch.
yeah, it's tough.
Tough pitch.
So they're interested in how we might be able to leverage this technology for safety. Here's where there's work to be done, although I think it's a challenge, but it's a massive opportunity. And what I've found working with the customers we have is, you'll put them in a headset, we'll work out what the procedures are, lockout, tag out, startup, shutdown, whatever those are. And the next thing they think of is, well, I want them to make mistakes and those have consequences, right?
Mm.
And that's an obvious expansion of the solution. And here's where it gets interesting, because then I say, okay, great. Now, here's where I need your help, though. What mistakes do they make? When do they make them? And which ones are material, right?
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is the old school guys have that matrix in their head, but again, it's never been what I call codified or encoded. So where I see a huge opportunity for XALTER and for the industry, again, is how do we encode that process, right? So that we are starting to build kind of these behavioral patterns, recognizing where mistakes get made, which ones are material, so that we start building safety training, right? That is more about practicing response time, right? Hazard recognition, AOC. That's an area that XALTER's very interested in. We are doing some safety. We're teaching line of fire,
Yeah.
lockout, tag out. Where we want to grow next is how do we build out those scenarios that you can't duplicate in the real world? This is the big gap,
Mm.
right? That we need to close. But XALTER needs help because we need our industry design partners, to see the value of closing that gap and investing in, you know, encoding what all those mistakes are and when they happen and when they're material. Because if we can do for energy what flight simulation's done for, the airline industry for
Mm.
pilots, it's a game changer. It would be an absolute game changer. So we're very interested in that conversation. we really want to grow the safety part of our solution. But we've got work to do. We need the industry to see the value of what we're doing. I always use this analogy, like we get on a plane, you know, you would be very concerned if you got in a plane with a pilot who did, when he looked out the window and saw smoke and had no idea what to do and got the manual out, right? The, re- the reason that we don't panic or worry about that is we know they've been in a flight simulator. That's probably never happened to them in real life, right? But they've practiced that so many times that if they were to look out the window and see smoke, they would know what knobs to start turning, what switches to flip, right? We don't have that in energy right now. So, unless they're an old guy with a finger missing and a lot of stories, they probably learned the hard way, right? But how could we learn the safe way and not the hard way? That's really the opportunity.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna ask a dumb question, which I've been known to do occasionally.
Good.
But
occasionally,
is VR AI? I mean, and again, that like, does it get lumped in with AI? Is it a completely separate thing? Because here, and before you answer that question, because I just want to say, I think part of maybe what you're up against is this massive AI wave. I think I know CEOs and board members of oil and gas companies and executives in all industries are telling their people, go figure out something with AI. Like, you got to do something with AI. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter if it's like a back office process. I don't care if it's something in the field to optimize something. Do something with AI. I don't think they're saying do something with virtual reality. You know what I'm saying? So, like, is there a way for you to put, is VR AI?
Well, it is not. They are different, but they are, in my opinion, incredibly complementary, which means one enables the other in some very unique ways. So what I would say is VR has the potential to be the medium and the interface for a lot of AI advancements, right? And what I mean by that is AI is great at pattern recognition. It's great at, kind of complex decision making and prediction, right? And so where AI plus VR or XR gets exciting is when one is serving the other, right? Because VR is a data-rich environment. So the other thing AI needs data, right? You hear this a lot. One of the things that I'm sure all the CEOs are challenged by is everybody wants to hit the AI button.
Yeah.
And most of them are being told that their data infrastructure is not AI ready, right? So they're struggling because everybody can see the end in sight. They know what the goal is, right? Everybody can imagine the ideal, right? But then they get told that there's a whole lot of work that's got to be done around their infrastructure, around their technology, around their data signals before you could fully leverage AI, right?
Yes.
So what I would say is VR, and I don't know if we'll get into augmented reality today, which is the other part of this conversation, and those two become XR. But VR is an enabling technology so that you could better leverage AI to impact frontline performance. And there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if it makes sense to try to get into all the reasons why, but I would just simply say, to answer your question, Jeremy, they are different, but they are incredibly related, because I would argue that head-mounted displays, virtual and augmented reality, is the interface for AI. And if you thought about a hybrid intelligence, how do you bring human intelligence and artificial intelligence together? That's how you do it. That's the intersection between the two, right? So it's the bridging medium and technology to bring human and artificial intelligence together to make decisions better, faster, and safer, would be the simple version.
Straight from a dictionary, right there.
Yeah.
I don't even need to look it up. Go right to Kevin.
Yeah.
Verbatim.
So there's a lot to unpack and why that's true.
Oh my God,
but I'm excited about what AR or what, XR, meaning virtual and augmented reality or head-mounted displays, plus AI means, right? It's going to be transformational. as it relates to human performance in general. But it's going to be transformational, certainly for energy if we can get our act together and do the right things in the right order.
Kevin, there's obviously a need for this in the energy space, right? That's where your focus is. My
Yes.
thought, just coming from the outside, is I'd have to think there's other industries that
Right.
deal with the same thing,
Yeah, there
right?
are.
Have you been approached by companies or just people you talk to and you're just telling what you do and they're like, "Oh, I'm in the utilities business or I'm in this and it's harder labor or we need stuff like that before we
Yeah.
just put someone who doesn't know what they're doing
Surgeons.
at
I mean,
risk."
I think
Yeah.
anybody
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
in
Medical
like,
profession.
Medical
yeah,
SKUs.
right.
Yep.
Yeah. And I get right, there's the one business concept of like, yes, I think there's opportunity. So I'm just more curious to hear in your
Yeah,
story what your
sure.
thought is. But like it's obviously you run a business, you're like, look, I want to stay focused on the energy space. I think there's a lot that
Yeah.
we can do there and I don't want to get too distracted. So I get that
Yeah.
point. But just more generalizing, right? I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
other folks can benefit.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, there are definitely a lot of companies in the space that XALTER's in. Um, and they're approaching the market in different ways, right? Medical's a huge area. A lot of investment is going into medical, um, for all the reasons that we talked about, right? In terms of just how do you better train surgeons, right, around medical. So that's happening. Aviation, again, there HVAC, again, where VR really shines is where there's a lot of skill development, skill transfer, where it's kind of spatial, it's hands-on, so there's an embodied element, right, of kind of doing the thing in a procedural way. So you're seeing a lot of activity around those. But yeah, you're right, Corey. I mean, there are definitely other industries besides energy. The decision that XALTER made to kind of focus on energy is for a couple reasons. It is practical, right? You can't do everything at once, and so we felt that it was important to focus. The other challenge is what we're wanting to do, and I think is important at this stage of adoption, is build out a library to get to kind of that critical mass. The content flywheel of you built enough content that you're starting to really serve an industry, right? It's not a one, it's not a one-off here and there, but you've got a body of training, safety and operational maintenance, where you're starting to look more like a solution, right, than just a few things
Yeah.
here and there, right, shiny objects. So the reason for that focus is because we are, as XALTER, very focused on building out a library-based solution of training, and this is expensive, complex training content to build. So, my goal is gas production. We finished. We're talking about midstream oil production, offshore, right? We're very interested in power gen. So if you thought about, and then there's the high voltage and grid, right? If you thought about just that, that's a massive uh, number of industries. If you thought about um, mechanical systems that need operational and maintenance, that's a whole lot of territory to
Mm.
cover, right? So
Oh, for
that's
sure.
that's the practical element of it. Is we want to focus and deliver a solution to an industry.
Yeah. Jay, I had flashbacks for a second at Universal Studios last week. They got a lot of those simulator kind of rides,
Yeah,
right? Kind of like
Yeah.
you're in the car and you feel like
yeah,
you feel like you're falling off a building. Spider-Man's
hmm
got to save. I'm trying to imagine that when you said like offshore rigs and having one of those, and it was
Oh,
like you're looking down at like the water if you had it all kind of like that. I don't know. Mine went
yeah,
there for a minute, but
yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah, but see, you're
you're right. In
connecting
fact,
work. Yeah, you're connecting work to real life. Like that's good.
yeah, 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 for sure. And even the height thing, again, Corey, if you haven't been in a headset in a while, I mean, people, if they're afraid of heights in real life, they're afraid of heights in a VR headset.
Yeah.
You have a visceral response because your brain just says this is real. I mean, I've seen people break out into a sweat, drop to their knees, and their feet are on the ground. They intellectually know that, but there's something about when your eyes and ears are captured, that you believe what you see, what you so that the height thing is wild. But yeah, on an offshore platform looking over the edge, you would feel that for sure.
Mm.
I need
So
one. I need one of these headsets with
You
that.
do.
well,
Just
we
saying.
we can make that
You do.
happen. I got one. I got one
We
upstairs.
can.
I got one upstairs. My son, he's 8. He loves to just put it on. It's not like going to a gas production facility is the most exciting thing to do, but it's just the whole idea of being in this virtual land. Honestly, it's kids
Yeah.
like it, and it's
Yeah.
super fun to see. He's asking to go to a gas production facility.
Yeah.
He
Imagine
doesn't know what
that.
that
Yeah.
means, but it's just
Yeah.
cool. It's like you're in a cartoon or something like that, right? It's a different world. It escapes from his regular world. I think it's like captures
Yeah.
his attention. So uh, we're gonna wrap up here in a minute, but Kevin, I do want to ask you. This is the Big Swing podcast, right?
Yes.
And you've
Yes.
taken a few of these. Like, would you say was your biggest swing from an entrepreneurial perspective, if you look back on your career? Is it XALTER? Was it something, your media content company leading up to that? Was it something else? Was it moving to Oklahoma? Like, I'm curious what you would put in that box of this was Kevin Anderson's big swing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know this is going to sound self-serving, but it's true. It is. I would say the decision to take, a successful media production company with a lot of really talented people and decide you're going to pivot to a brand new medium that there's not a market for, there's no business model for,
Yeah.
and instinctively, there's probably a 20-year adoption cycle, which is typical. I'd say we're about 10 years in. This has been my biggest swing by far, is XALTER. So, kind of putting it all on the line because I just wanted to, I wanted to take a big swing. I mean, I didn't want to be the guy who was there when, a new medium got invented, an amazing new technology was created. You understood its implications and you just went, I'll pass. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, go off into the sunset, So yeah, I mean, this is my biggest swing by far, is XALTER.
Love it. Love it.
Well, it's always easier, I think, Jeremy, on the founder-led series, right? Because there's big swings in so many ways for people to choose from, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, definitely you, Kevin. I mean, you just even go from California to Oklahoma.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm a
most
big
people,
swing
most
kinda
people
guy.
can't venture. People can't venture that far. I mean, hell, it was
No,
Oklahoma
yeah.
State. The farthest people went was from whatever town and going to Oklahoma
Yeah.
State and then going back to the town, right? I mean, especially
Yeah.
in
I mean,
Cali.
I mean, I would say my risk tolerance, borders on, ridiculous or, almost self-destructive, right? Like, I love risk. I love complicated problems that have to be solved. It's just always been, I've always been interested in technology and people and, and I like risk. So here I am out, out over my skis all the way to the tippy ends of the skis, right? Trying to figure out if I can get energy to adopt a brand new technology to do something they've been doing the same way since, the industry was invented, right? So yeah, that's swinging big. And Jeremy's in the boat with me.
I am.
He's
I am.
rowing away.
I'm rowing hard, and you never know who it's going to land with. I think that's the crazy thing too, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you look at a
yeah,
company as innovative, and you assume, oh, they're going to love this, and it's just like, yeah, we haven't really talked about that. And then you find some podunk company in the middle of nowhere that's like, actually, yeah, like all of our guys are going to retire soon, and if we're going to get this next generation trained, we better get up to speed on like how they like to learn. Otherwise, like, I don't know what we're going to do. I'll be out there turning wrenches and knobs and all that stuff. So, Kevin, where can people find XALTER if they want to reach out to you to get more information? Where's the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they can start at the website. Obviously it's www.exalter.com, and that's spelled with an X. So we're not called Zalter, although I understood that was going to be a challenge. But it's XALTER.com. And, if you want to reach out to me, you can reach me at kevin@exalter.com. I'm available by email. If you want to call somebody, Jeremy, they can call you.
You
So if you
call
want to give
me.
your cell number out, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's exalter.com, or send me an email, kevin@exalter.com. Happy to talk.
Jeremy, it might be expensive, but you might need to think about Des Bryant for marketing. Just throwing up the X.
Throwing up
For
the
all my
X.
Dallas
Yeah, I
Cowboys
love
fans.
it. I love
For
it.
those who follow the Cowboys.
Well, we
Kevin,
didn't have
man,
time
this
to
has
get
been
into
awesome on
tournament
that.
stuff. Yeah, Kevin,
Hey,
you're the
thanks,
man.
Corey.
We
So
appreciate it. We
Corey,
appreciate it.
appreciate it. Yeah. So what happened in the last hour on your bracket? Anything you got
Yeah,
to
what do
talk
we
about?
miss? What do we miss?
All right, let's pull it up. Ferris didn't have it. Virginia came out ahead on Wright State.
Okay.
So no damage. 3 took care of
Okay.
14. Arizona
All right.
won. Looks like we got a game at halftime between Alabama and Hofstra. Alabama up 2, so I don't know.
So you're in the
Ohio State
hunt.
went away. So yeah, it seems like all the favorites, all the higher seeds are doing what they're supposed to do.
Sweet.
No
Yeah.
bracket craziness.
Well, I appreciate y'all. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, man.
To be on the big swing. Enjoyed it, and obviously hope we get to do it again.
Yeah.
We will. We will.
We
'Cause I wanna
appreciate it,
hear,
Kevin.
Yeah, I want to hear about what else people start coming to you with. See, that's the thing, Corey, that I've seen in our work with XALTER and with Kevin is nobody can leave well enough alone. Once somebody sees what you're doing, there's always the immediate of like, well, have you thought about? Well, what would be
Yeah.
cool is if you had, it's impossible not to go there
Yeah.
because
It
of
does
the
trigger
world that it
people's
opens up your
imagination.
eyes to.
Yeah, it does.
100%.
It really does. It inspires people for sure. That's a fun part of the conversation is what's possible. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Appreciate you, man.
Well,
Thanks
Kevin, I
for coming
wish you
on.
the best of luck, man. I'll
Thank
be
you,
following
Corey.
you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Talk to y'all later, gentlemen.
Pleasure.